So when you're looking at these problems, if you read the directions, it says to solve for x using factoring, completing the square, or the quadratic formula. It gives you the option of picking whichever one you would like to do. So with a problem like this, the first thing I'm going to always check is factoring, because to me, factoring is the fastest way. But if you don't like factoring and you really like the quadratic formula, you can use the quadratic formula to solve all of these. I definitely wouldn't do completing the square here because b is an odd number, so it'll give you a fraction, which is not really nice to work with. But I am always going to check the factoring first. So a is 1 and c is negative 10. So 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. So then if I check my factors of negative 10, I've got 1 and 10, or negative 1 and 10. And then negative 10 and 1, negative 5 and positive 2, and negative 2 and positive 5. And I want to see if any of those are going to add up to give me negative 9. So when I look at these, I actually see that negative 10 and positive 1 will add up to give me negative 9. So I can go ahead and draw my box. Remember, top left is x squared. Bottom right is negative 10. And then I use the circle numbers to fill in the other two boxes. So negative 10x and positive 1x. So then we're looking for GCFs in each column and row. So in these top two, x squared and 1x, I have a GCF of x. In negative 10x and negative 10, I have the same thing of negative 10. In the rows, x squared minus 10x, I have an x in both. And 1x and negative 10, the only thing in common is a 1. So then I have x minus 10, parentheses, x plus 1, equals 0. But remember, for you to multiply two things together and get it to equal 0, it means that you have to set each of them equal to 0 because one of them has to be 0. All right, so then to solve this, we're going to add 10 on both sides. So x equals 10. And then over here, we're going to subtract 1 on both sides, so x equals negative 1. So there are my two answers, 10 and negative 1. But like I said, if you do the quadratic formula, you will actually get these same answers, 10 and negative 1, but I would not suggest completing the square on this problem. All right, if we look at this problem, the first thing we want to check yet again is factoring. So if we check our factoring, 4 times negative 2 equals negative 8. So factors of negative 8, so negative 4 and positive 2, negative 2 and positive 4, negative 8 and positive 1, or negative 1 and positive 8. But none of those is going to add up to give me positive 8. So I can't factor these. So then I have the options of quadratic formula or completing the square. I like to do completing the square on these. I will actually show you both of them, completing the square and quadratic formula, but a lot of you will probably do quadratic formula, but you'll see that you get the same answer no matter which one you use. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this just so that I have the space to write them both out. All right, so quadratic formula, which will always work no matter what. You can't always complete the square, but you can always quadratic formula. So if we quadratic formula, A is 4, B is 8, and C is negative 2. You will be given the quadratic formula on the test, so don't hesitate about that. So negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is negative 2, all over 2A. Then we simplify negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64. So negative 4 times negative 2 is going to give you, so I'm trying to find where I multiply this out, is going to give you a positive 32, all divided by 8. And then we simplify negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 96 over 8. And then you got to simplify the square root of 96, break it down. So 96 is 16 times 6, 16 is 4 times 4, 6 is 3 times 2. Break down 4s into 2 sets of 2. I have a pair of 2s and a pair of 2s. A 3 and a 2 are left over. So I have 2 times 2 root 6, or sorry, 4 root 6 total. So then I'm going to replace that. I'm going to move all this stuff up so that I can continue to write, and then I will make it so that it's all on the screen at the end. So I'm going to replace it. So negative 8 plus or minus 4 root 6 over 8. Then I need to simplify this whole fraction. What goes into 8? Negative 8, 4, and 8. So I can divide all of those by 4. So then I have negative 2 plus or minus 1 root 6 over 2. And then I'll show you completing the square and how you get the same thing. All right, so that is the final answer with quadratic formula. So then I'm going to move this over here and I'm going to do completing the square so that you can see how that you can do either of them and you will still get the right answer. So remember, with completing the square, the first thing you do is get rid of C. Oops. 4x squared plus 8x plus blank. And remember, it's always plus blank. All right, and then we got to get rid of that front number. By taking it out of both of them. Then you take the middle and divide by 2. So we have 4x plus 1 all squared. Then remember, we have to take that 1 and square it to fill in our blank. 1 squared is 1. Then we distribute the 4 times the 1. It gives us 4 that goes in this blank. And then we got to say, how do I get from 4 to minus 2? I have to take away 6. So that now equals 0. And so now we just solve this. And this is where some of y'all struggled on the quiz, was solving this. So we will add 6 to both sides. 4 times x plus 1 squared equals 6. Divide by 4 on both sides. So then you have x plus 1 all squared equals 6 over 4. And yes, you can simplify that fraction. I'm not going to, because you'll see in a minute that we actually use that 4. All right, so then we square root both sides. So x plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 6 over 4. Then we subtract 1 on both sides. So then that gives you the same answer. X equals negative 1 plus or minus, and then we can take the square root of the 4 on the bottom. So it's square root of 6 over 2. So this is the same thing as what you have over there. I know it doesn't look exactly the same, but I'm telling you they are equivalent. So either of these is correct. They're the same answer for both of them. No matter what way you use it, you're still going to get the same answer. So please keep that in mind. I don't care which way you do. I will have both answers on the answer key. So you are welcome to use whichever one makes the most sense or works the best for you. Okay, looking at 31, we have, if we're trying to look at factoring, we have 7. The only factors of 7 are 7 and 1. You have no way to get 4. So we're either going to have to use quadratic formula or completing the square. Yet again, you can use either one. You're going to get the same answer. I'm going to start with completing the square this time. I will show you both of them. So first thing we want to do, actually, we don't really need that minus or that equals 0, so I'm going to leave it off. So x squared plus 4x plus blank, so get rid of c. Then there's no front number, so we just divide by 2. So x plus 2 squared. And then 2 squared is 4. How do I get from 4 to minus 7? I need to minus 11. So now we bring back down that equals 0 and we solve. Add 11 to both sides. So x plus 2 squared equals 11. Square root both sides. X plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 11. And we subtract the 2 on both sides. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 11. So to me, that's shorter and that's easier. But if you like to do the quadratic formula because this doesn't make sense to you, that's perfectly fine. You're going to get the same exact answer. So if we're doing quadratic formula, A is 1, B is 4, and C is negative 7. So negative B, so negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 28 over 2. Then we have to simplify that. So negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 44 over 2. But we do have to simplify that square root of 44. Break it down into 4 times 11. Break down the 4, 2 times 2. I have a pair of 2s, so I have 2 root 11 that I'm going to plug back in. Negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 11 over 2. We can simplify it. Negative 2 plus or minus root 11. Same answer, 2 different ways. It's all about what makes most sense to you and what is easiest for you to do. Looking at number 32, let's yet again check and see if we can factor. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Factors of negative 15 that add to negative 20, there aren't any. So we can't factor it. All right, let's look at what we can do. We can do completing the square. It does give you a little bit of a different answer than what you're going to get if you do quadratic formula, but quadratic formula does have sort of a big number. So you can do either one. I'm going to start with quadratic formula this time, and then I'll do the completing the square. So A is 5, B is negative 20, and C is negative 3. So if we plug it in, minus negative 20, because remember it's minus B, plus or minus the square root of negative 20 squared minus 4 times A times C, all divided by 2 times A. Now we want to simplify. Negative, negative, or minus, minus gives you a positive 20. Plus or minus the square root of negative 20 squared is 400. So then negative 4 times 5 times negative 3 is plus 60, all divided by 2 times 5, which is 10. Then we want to keep simplifying. 20 plus or minus the square root of 460 over 10, but I need to break up that root 460. I've got to break that down, so I'm going to do 46 and 10. So then I want to break down 46 as 2 times 23. I can't break down 2 or 23, but I can break down 10 as 5 times 2. So I have a pair of 2's. And then by itself, I have 23 and 5, which I know is kind of funky, but that's okay. So it's 2 root 23 times 5, which is 2 root 115. So then I have to replace that into my problem. So I have 20 plus or minus 2 root 115 over 10. And what goes into 22 and 10? I can divide 2 into all of them. So I have 10 plus or minus root 115 over 5. And that is my final answer there for quadratic formula. All right, now if we go back and look and do completing the square. So let's do that over here. So I'm going to write it down because remember we got to get rid of C. So then we want to take out our leading coefficient of 5, take it out of both pieces. So x squared minus 4x plus blank. So since that minus 4 is still even, we can take it and divide it by 2. So it's going to be x minus 2 squared. Don't forget to bring down the 5 in the front. So then negative 2 squared is positive 4. 5 times 4 is 20. How do I get from 20 to minus 3? I take away 23. So then that equals 0. So now I have to solve. Add 23 to both sides. 5 times x minus 2 all squared equals 23. Divide by 5 on both sides. And then I got x minus 2 all squared equals 23 over 5. I want to square root both sides to get rid of that squared. So then I have x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 23 over 5, which I can't really simplify. I actually can't do anything with that part. So I want to then add 2 to both sides so that I can be finished. So then x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 23 over 5. And I know you're thinking to yourself, Miss Moore, that does not actually look the same as what you got for the quadratic formula. It actually is. It is the exact same. It's just a more simplified version, which is perfectly fine. They are both equivalent versions of the same thing. What I'm going to tell you is they're not going to look the same if you do completing the square if it has a leading coefficient. So a leading coefficient, remember, is that number in front. So if there's a number in front of x squared, it's not going to look the exact same, but they will be equivalent values. If you're looking at 33, looking for factors of 12 are, let's see, so we're looking for actually factors of negative 12. So 2 and 6, or negative 2 and 6, negative 6 and 2, negative 3 and 4, negative 4 and 3. None of those actually add up to give you positive 2, so you still can't factor this one. All right, so yet again, you can use quadratic formula or you can use completing the square. Because A is 1, I'm actually going to use completing the square first, and then I'll show you quadratic formula as well. So I'm going to go ahead and write it down. And then we get rid of C. Always plus blank. So then there's nothing to divide out of the front, so we just take the middle and divide by 2. 1 squared is 1. And how do I get from 1 to minus 12? I take away 13. It equals 0, so I'm going to add 13 on both sides. So x plus 1 all squared equals 13. To get rid of that squared, I radical both sides. X plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 13, because we can't really simplify that. Minus 1 on both sides, x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 13. So to me, that is the easiest way to do this. But you can do quadratic formula. It is just as correct. It is a little bit longer, though. So let's work that out. So A is 1, B is 2, and C is negative 12. So if I plug that in, minus 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 12 all over 2 times 1. So negative 2 plus or minus 4 plus 48 over 2. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 52 over 2. And then I have to simplify that radical 52 and actually see if I can simplify it. So it's going to be 2 and 26. 26 is 2 and 13. I have a pair of 2's. So I have negative 2 plus or minus 2 root 13 over 2. So I can divide those 2's by the 2. Negative 1 plus or minus 1 root 13, which is the exact same thing we got from completing the square. So you'll see either way, you get the same answer and they are both correct. One is no more right than the other. All right, one last problem. Last one. All right, 2 times negative 11 is negative 22. So then that's going to be negative 2 and 11, or negative 11 and 2, and 1 and 22, and none of those are going to give you 20. So can't use factoring yet again. Sorry, just worked out that way. So, but we can use completing the square or quadratic formula. I am going to show you quadratic formula first with this one. So A is 2, B is 20, and C is negative 11. So I do minus and then 20 plus or minus the square root of 20 squared minus 4 times A times C, all divided by 2 times A. So negative 20 plus or minus the square root of 400 plus 88, all divided by 2. So then negative 20 plus or minus the square root of 488 over 2. So negative 20. Oh, we got to simplify that. So square root, maybe not over the way over there. So square root of 488. 488. And we got to break that down, which is a big number to break down. I did 4 and 122. And then I did 2 and 2, and 122 breaks down into 2 and 61. So all I have a pair of is 2's. So it's 2 root 2 times 61, which is 2 root 122. So plus or minus 2 root 122 all over 2. Last up, we can divide both these pieces by 2. Negative 10 plus or minus root 122. Actually, I am seeing a mistake I made. It was 2 times 2. So this denominator should actually be 4. So let me fix my mistake here. So we're dividing by 4. So then 20, what goes into 22 and 4? It is 2. So it's negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 122 over 2. That's my final answer. Sorry about that mistake, guys. It happens, right? I'm sure you saw it while you were watching this. You're like, Miss Moore, that's 2 times 2. Silly, silly Miss Moore. Okay, so now let's do completing the square. I am going to erase this factoring stuff that I did off to the side just to make sure I have plenty of space. Okay, so let's work this out. So I'm going to rewrite the problem. and then get rid of C. Take out the 2 in the front. And if you don't think this part is easier and you don't like this completing the square, don't do it. You can be done with the video right now. So then I divide my middle by 2. I just think that this ends up being quicker. But everybody has their own opinions and choices. 5 squared is 25. 2 times 25 is 50. And how do I get from 50 to minus 11? I minus 61. Now that equals 0. Add 61 on both sides. 2 times x plus 5 all squared equals 61. Divide by 2 on both sides. So then I am left with x plus 5 all squared equals 61 over 2. I want to square root both sides. So x plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 61 over 2. And then I want to minus 5 on both sides. And my final answer, x equals -5 plus or minus the square root of 61 over 2. And I did check, they are equivalent. So either of those answers is fine and correct. Either way, you can do this. It does not matter. It is always up to you which way you choose to do this. I do always check for factoring first just because it is the quickest way. I hope this helped. And if you have any questions, please let me know before your test on Friday. Have a good day, guys.